I'm Kytia.
And I'm Jerrell.
Welcome to our podcast where we talk about glowing through life
Instead of just going through life.
It's a his and hers perspective about modern topics and hot button issues.
From Christians just like you.
Well, let's get into it. We're gonna glow through it. My faith in God, He taught me how to do it.
Hello guys, welcome to our channel. Our podcast again, and thank you for hearing this. I really thank you for all the thumbs ups and subscribes, and we're gonna do another one of going through it. And thank you for wanting to hear our podcast, and thank you guys for hearing this. And bye. Thank you.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Glowing Through It. This is episode number 22 of 2020, the year 2020. I'm Kytia L'amour, and this is my husband,
Jerrell Connor.
And today is all about our announcement that we just posted a couple of days ago.
What announcement?
The announcement that we are expecting baby number 2, and it is nice to finally be talking about it. I commented back, I replied to some people's comments, basically saying like we never intended to wait this long to announce, but God's timing is interesting, and that's kind of the first thing that I'll be talking about. I have like 5 different categories today regarding our pregnancy, and so yeah, I think it's just a relief to talk about it. Not that we've been purposely trying to hide it. It's just been, we'll get into that. But basically, it's nice to have the cat, as they say, out of the bag. So, Jerrell, how do you feel about our announcement that just went up a couple of days ago and just it being public now?
I guess kind of relieved, or not kind of, just relieved. A lot of people, it's kind of like dancing around like, oh, I can't say this about this post, or we recorded this podcast and I can't mention this, or we're doing a video and I gotta make sure shoot it this way, or just a lot of the dancing around the issue. So it's nice to finally share, because we don't really like to be so edited or guarded about stuff that we want to freely share with people about our experience and what's going on. And it's something to be excited about and something to celebrate. So it's nice to be able to celebrate with other people, I guess.
Yeah, and that's been the thing for me recently, like just all of the encouragement and supportive comments that we've gotten about this. Because I did mention in February the only video that I shot like on my professional camera like in a long time, where it was a life update, and I mentioned like we're gonna have a podcast, and we are I think we were saying we're trying for number 2. However I worded it, it was basically like number 2 could be on the way at some point. Like, now is the time we feel okay about it, but don't ask me anything about being pregnant, because you just never know how long it's going to take people if they have issues getting pregnant or whatever. I didn't expect to have issues, but I also know some things just take time, and we trust the Lord. So the first subject I basically wanted to get into was God's timing, His perfect timing, and it just being very interesting. I've mentioned this in like maybe 2 of my hundreds of videos that I've put up on YouTube, where people, I think, have asked about if we want more kids, or the subject has come up about having a sibling for Petra and stuff, and we've always wanted that. We've always wanted more children. I never thought it would be a 6-year gap, and part of the reason why that is because we wanted to have the peace of the Lord on this, because it is a very big decision to make, to try to conceive, bring a whole human life into this world. And some people, it's a little bit taboo of a subject to even like think about planning out a family. Some people say if you're not ready for kids, don't even get married because that's what marriage is about. I've heard that before, when I was 23 getting married, and someone's like, why are you, like, are you wanting kids right now? Like, what's the rush? Like, why are you want to get married? And I'm like, that's not what all that marriage is about, is procreating. But some people do think that, and some people think it's wrong to prevent pregnancy or have any kind of a say. They're like, if God wants to do it, he'll do it. And there's plenty of people who have, that's their conviction, and that's fine. But that really hasn't been mine since we've been married, to just be like, well, we'll go with the wind. Because I also feel like discussions that we've had in the past about making a responsible choice, like for the first few years before Petra was around, I remember wanting a baby really bad, but like, really, like, is it going to be a responsible thing to be pregnant right now? Like, over the years, we would just have that conversation, and it's like, why do that? Like, it's hard enough having a child. Why would you want it to have all these extra things of like issues and financial stuff and like things like that, instability in your career? I just didn't want that we didn't want that. And so we did have her. Not that life you can really plan, because a lot of stuff does just come up and you're like, wow, I didn't expect that to happen. Like, if I knew that was going to happen, I probably wouldn't, have tried to have a kid right now. But like, it is what it is. And we had peace about when we were trying to conceive with Petra. And again, like I said, years later, year after year, we've thought about it like, Lord, is it the time? And we've never felt peace. And like, this is even a part of a larger testimony that will be coming in the future about certain reasons why we didn't have peace about trying for baby number 2, things that we've been through, a lot of stuff that we've been working on internally and in our spiritual life and in relationships and all that stuff, where it was just, and even just ministry, career, just kind of everything just twisting and turning and feeling kind of like a roller coaster of what God was trying to do for us and in us. And it was just not time to have baby number 2. So both of us, last December of 2019, we felt peace about trying again. And so December rolls around, not pregnant. January rolls around. And it's kind of interesting because I'll speak a little bit about the waiting. And even though it literally only took us 3 months, December, January, February, to try to conceive and actually get pregnant in February, because the waiting on God, 6 years, for me, it was just like, I want it right away. And every period that came with obviously not being pregnant, I remember crying like in January and being like, man, like, this is the worst. This is the worst news ever. We're not pregnant right now. And, it's like, it doesn't make sense to be that sad and devastated, but it's just like, you wanted something so bad, you waited so long. And then now you feel as a time, and it's just like, you feel like, I wanted this, yesterday. Like, I wanted this to happen like 2 years ago. So like, make it happen now. And, and either way, it happened quickly, and we're very blessed that it did. But the timing was definitely interesting. And I would love to know in the comments, I guess on YouTube is the only place you can comment. But if you're watching this on YouTube, listening to it on YouTube, I would love to know even your thoughts about trying to conceive, having children, adding to the family. What role do you feel like God has in that? Do you feel like, once you're married, you just don't let anything get in the way, get pregnant as many times as you get pregnant? Or do you believe in God giving you peace about it and having timing and basically feeling the go ahead to try? I'm kind of curious about that. It wouldn't change my mind about anything, but I'm just curious how people feel about that. So Jerrell, now you can say your piece about just the waiting period and how you felt when, we got the peace of the Lord to try, and then even just the whole getting pregnant.
Well, with this, I think, like with most things in life, God's timing is so crucial. And it's really interesting to see when God ordains something, how the timing kind of works out. Because you touched on it a little bit, but like, I think before we even got married, like one of the first, like our first unofficial, official, whatever, first date, We talked so much about like what we wanted in life, where we're gonna live, what we're looking for, and children came up, and we had like, okay, well, I always plan on having this many. I always plan on having this many, and a lot of things kind of lined up. And this was before we even were like together, just kind of sharing our life and what God had been leading us to do. And so with timing with our daughter, with Petra, it was, I remember like conversation we had early in our marriage, and just like we wanted to have a period of time where we were getting to know each other, and we didn't want to just rush into it and have kids be part of the equation like right away. We had so much that we wanted to experience together. So I think it was 5 years around that time where I was like, this would be enough time for this, and we kind of planned around certain things, and it ended up being that our first child was born like about 5 years into our marriage. And with the second one, initially we had thought we don't want them to be far apart, being close together, and that kind of really seemed like 2 to 3 years was the gap, where one's out of diapers when the other one comes around, but it wasn't like spaced out that far. And then as circumstances and situations changed, and we saw how, I think one of the factors was that like where we were in our lives and with all the uncertainty of certain things, and then also knowing the personality of our daughter and kind of the attention that she needed and a lot of things, it definitely felt like we were moving into a not yet. We just weren't ready, and the situation just it wasn't called for. And in terms of God's timing, it was so interesting or so cool to me that we didn't really talk a lot about it in terms of we're going to plan on when we're going to have this conversation, and we'll check in every few months, or it's been a year, so we had to talk about it. It was a thing where it was like literally it had been on both of our hearts like for like not very long, probably just a few days or a couple weeks. And then we ended up having a conversation where I think you brought it up, and then I was like, yeah, me too. Like we both, it was like confirmed with both of us before we didn't like sit down and pray about it together. We already had that that God had prompted in both of us, and then we prayed about it together just to confirm it, and everything worked. I mean, it was something that we had not planned on waiting this long, but everything lined up and made sense. So I think that's kind of a testament to there's a scripture that like man makes plans, but God orders steps. So I think it's one of those situations for sure.
Yeah, and the thing that I forgot to mention, this is the last thing I'll say about God's timing that's interesting, is some of you may know that in 2013, we did get pregnant for the first time ever, and we actually had a miscarriage later in that year. And then months go by, and then we conceived Petra. So the interesting thing about timing and things is when I was in February of 2013, I was around my birthday because my birthday is February 12th. Valentine's is February 14th. So like I had surprised Jerrell with a parasailing trip in Marina Del Rey in California. And so it's like we're flying up in the air, however many hundreds of feet. And then, recently, like days after that, like we conceived the first pregnancy. And then we lost the baby in April of that year. So that baby would have been due in November of 2013. That didn't happen. And then we conceived Petra. And then she was born the following year in July 2014. And then the interesting thing about the timing of this pregnancy is even though we had tried purposely in December and January, baby was not conceived. But around my birthday, I had actually gotten a gift for Jerrell this year, to go on a hot air balloon ride. And it was for his birthday, so January of this year, and it got canceled due to weather. So then we had a trip planned. So I was like, well, once we get back from our trip at the end of January, I'll reschedule. So I guess now it's my birthday that we're going to be going on this parasailing, or not parasailing, hot air balloon ride. And so we get back from our trip. Now it's my birthday. And so I scheduled it on my birthday that we went on the hot air balloon ride. So we're hundreds and hundreds of feet up in the air, a surprise gift for Jerrell again. And then a few days later, we conceive this baby, which is due November 2020. So it's just like kind of interesting. Like, I'm not one of those people who's like, oh, this is like, I don't know. It's like, oh, God is doing this on purpose. Maybe like I don't know. I see it as a special thing. And I'm just not reading into it so much to where it's like, oh, like it had to happen like this and blah, blah. Like, I don't know, but I'm just saying there's a lot of things that are in common where it's like, oh, is God redeeming, that loss? Because I do wonder, about that. What would it be like to have that baby in November? What, blah, blah, like, what would pregnancy be like? What would it be like that time of year? Like, all those kind of things. I can't have a time machine and make that baby not be miscarried. But now it's like having so many things be similar. It's like, wow, that's kind of special that happened. So the next subject is, with my smooth transition to a new subject, is build a bridge. So the next thing is personal things. So timing is so like interesting just with all of this, because I found out I was pregnant. I took a test February 27th. So I find out I'm pregnant. And then 2 days later, a lot of things in our life got turned upside down. And it's so interesting because it's like, oh, look at how smooth things are. Look at what's happening here. Like, you envision, oh, this is what God is saying to do it right now. Like, you have peace about it. And then 2 days later, it's like a lot of things kind of fell apart in our lives personally. I'll just say we're okay, as a family, me and my husband, our daughter, baby, like, we're all good. We have everything that we need. Everything is fine. As far as what really matters, it's just inconveniences, and things that are just unfortunate happened surrounding us that affect us. And it's just like, oh man, like, what are the odds? Like, what a terrible time for this stuff to happen. It's like in the middle of celebrating, like, wow, we've conceived and we're just on this high. And then all of a sudden all this stuff happens, and that's life. Unfortunately, things do come up. But fortunately, even though all these things happen that, like I said, are inconvenience, unfortunate, just a little bit of a downer, a rain on the parade, we've still had this beautiful gift since then. Because I'm still blessed. I'm still excited. It's still wonderful to be expecting. So it puts a very bright ray of sunshine over everything. And so that is what's been interesting to me, because it's like it affects a lot of things about our lives currently, as far as like what we're focused on and what we're doing. And even for me, like the emotional toll that kind of took has, I guess I feel like God had called me into just a rest and just a sitting still, and just having to just sit down and focus and be like, wow, Lord, like, because I always sit down and get instructions like, well, what's for February? What's for March? Like, what's my assignment? Am I doing videos? Am I doing this? Am I doing that? But the really cool thing about it is like what God had called us to do with this podcast. The timing of that is very interesting, because I hadn't felt like being on camera. I hadn't felt like, oh, lights, camera, action, like get all ready, like, and talk about this and that. There's been a lot of days where it's just like, I just need to be with Jesus. And like, I can't give this much that I used to. Like, this is all I can do right now. And the podcast has been kind of great, a thing to focus on, and something I can do with my husband. So, something we just set up a microphone and we do it, and not have to be dealing with all this other extraneous things that kind of add more time and just emotional toll on top of you. So the cool thing about that is, starting this podcast, we weren't pregnant yet. But the cool, how many times am I going to say the cool thing is? But the cool thing is, surprisingly enough, with our podcast, every week that our podcast goes live is another week of pregnancy to the day. So if this is episode 22, I'm 22 weeks pregnant today, like when this goes up, every Sunday is a new week for me. So it's like episode 22, week 22 of pregnancy. So I'm not sure if this will be like a thing where the podcast only lasts for, this pregnancy, or it continues to go beyond, if it'll always be on Sundays, I don't know. But either way, like it's just really great to have.
No, it's really cool.
It's really cool to have that kind of line up like that. It's just the timing of things is just very, very interesting is all I'll say. But yeah, that's what's been basically all I can do right now. All I've been called to do. This is what my assignment is. I've pulled back from a lot of things, not just from personal stuff, but even just, weeks after finding out we're pregnant, the world shuts down. And it's just like, wow. So that has been a lot to process. And so, Jerrell, you can talk more about that, because I've talked about how personal things kind of affected me and slowed me down and made me focus on what matters and my health, the health of the baby, and focusing on that kind of stuff and getting in close with the Lord and just stopping and pausing. But as far as like you being now a dad of 2, and then the world shuts down and then all that stuff, like how do you think that affected you, and how did you transition with just so much spinning around in our heads and even just around the world?
Well, to that point, I think I'll segue from the personal to the world globally kind of a thing. So for us, with the high and low, I guess, of, hey, new bundle of joy on the way. Then 2 days later, hey, the bottom's falling out of everything. So I think what I did notice is oftentimes when there's a blessing and there's something awesome that God is doing, the enemy tries to creep in and steal your joy, or bring up a distraction, or like shift your focus from the good to the bad, and to get you off course, get you off track. That's a big attack or tactic from the enemy. And as believers, we know like where or who our enemy is, and what kind of weapons or warfare we wage. It's not a physical, it's not a carnal one. So that being said, about like personal stuff, it kind of was the same way with what's happening with the world, and in the world. For me, it was very much like there is an awesome responsibility and a blessing that you have in the family, and with the family growing and all of these things. And we even have, like, in our personal lives, we have books that are coming out. We have devotionals and podcasts and all these things that were being released. And then, like, the bottom falling out with our personal stuff, then coronavirus creeping around, then it became a pandemic, then it became quarantine, then it became race wars and Black Lives Matter and riots and burning down cities and the police being gone, and just so many things that like compound like one thing after another. And I think going back to the first point, it's like when you have something good and you have a purpose or a calling and something you're focused on that you're supposed to be focused on, that's oftentimes when the enemy comes in and tries to get you, hey, look over here. This is what you need to be concerned about. This is what you need to be worried about. And through it all, kind of seeing that it's a big distraction. Like I know that there are real elements to a lot of the things that are going on in the world. So if a small number of people are dying for this, or involved with sickness, or from brutality or riots, that is a thing, but it's not the way that it's being presented to us. So there's a lot of deception, and there's a lot of things that are shrouded in darkness that are meant to displace our focus, to get us scared, to be fearful, to get us off of what we're supposed to be focused on. And I've noticed that even with within our personal life and the things that fell out, it was like a lot of things that we thought were one way, and it was really kind of, oh, this isn't what we thought it was. This is totally different, and it was being revealed to us. So I feel like that kind of mirrors what's happening around us in the world, where it's like, okay, there's these issues, but everybody's telling us, oh, drop what you're doing. Everything is focused on these other things. But it's like, uh, no, we actually know that God called us to do this and to do this other stuff. And if we did just spend 20 hours on social media going through everybody's posts and what they're talking about and going along with the flow of these things, then we would be totally out of line with the things that we're supposed to be really focusing on. So I feel like centering ourselves with the Lord, seeking Him through prayer, through supplication, through fasting, through just spending time with Him, like that is such a major part of it. Like if you don't know what you're called to do or what your relationship with God is, the only remedy is to spend time with Him to find out and pray about it. So being a believer, being a Christian, He is the thing, the person that grounds everything else. So seeking, basically righting the ship, basically having a foundation where there's a storm, but you're not blown all around because you're being tossed around by the waves or tossed around by the wind. And that's like the only way to be grounded and truly focused in the midst of all of the turmoil and the storms and the things that are going on in the world, globally, and even personally in our lives. So definitely Jesus, a lot of Jesus is definitely the answer and the key. And He's been faithful throughout all of this stuff. And it's kind of interesting. Last point, it's very much like Joseph. I think we brought him up a couple times, the story of Joseph in the Bible, where he went through so many hardships, and most of them were not by his doing, and it wasn't necessarily God punishing him, but he went through trials, and at the end, because he was faithful and he kept focusing on what God was doing, that God used his gifts and talents, that in the time of famine, in the time of imprisonment, in the time of all of these crazy things around him, he still was like lifted up and elevated out of it. And he was blessed and he prospered. His family was prospering in the midst of a lot of terrible things that were going on in the world. And I think that's very encouraging, because that's what your life as a believer, that's like the pinnacle of what it should be. Like if you're holding on to God and focus on Him, like 100 or 1,000 could fall on your right side and on your left. So none of that stuff is going to touch you in the way that it does the world. So definitely holding on to God in these times. And we have seen the favor of the Lord in our lives in ways that have been kind of awesome. And what do you say? Pretty cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's good.
Yeah, and I think that's been something major that we have purposely, intentionally had to focus on, because that is it's true. There are many things that are happening, and a lot of things that could steal your focus and steal your joy and your hope. But throughout this time, something that I still thank God for multiple times as we pray at nighttime before we go to bed is just like, sometimes I wonder, I'm like, there's all this stuff going on, and people's lives literally are turned upside down, and to the point of wreckage, and us on the other hand always had food, always had shelter, always had money, always have gas in the car, like always had peace in our home and within our marriage, and with us and our daughter. And it's like we keep pushing forward and plugging along, and it's just almost surreal to know like how we've been hardly affected in a negative way from what is happening in this world. And I think that really does show how good God is, and like Jerrell said, that is favor, because it could be really bad, and it could really be taking its toll, and for us specifically, like, it hasn't. And that's miraculous, I think. And it does help me when I do feel like, man, when the enemy creeps in with doubt, and it's just like, was this all a mistake? Was it all a lie? Did I really hear what God said? And that'll happen basically anytime God tells you, even if it's simple, take this person out to lunch. And then you're like, well, I didn't see any results from that. Was I supposed to do that? Did I hear the Lord? And the enemy will always have you questioning every choice that you make. Did you really hear? Did God really say? And then I'm just like, no, God really did say it was time. And these things are just very, like I said, I like to say inconvenient instead of like, it's the worst. Like there have been days where I'm like, this is the worst timing and the worst days and I feel terrible. But when I'm in my right mind and I'm focused on what is good and pleasing and pure and noble and true, then I'm just like, wow, I'm really in a much better position than many, many, many people. And that's all attributed to the Lord. So thank you, God, that not only are we protected and safe from a lot of things, but on top of that, a whole human life is coming, in a matter of a few months. that human life will be here. And I did actually start documenting on my blog every 2 weeks, since my 12th week in pregnancy. Every 2 weeks I've put up a blog. It's not live yet. I haven't published anything. It will be coming soon, but I wanted to blog this process because I'm so glad that I did that with my pregnancy with Petra. It wasn't always consistent. Like I was consistent in the beginning, and then it's like 5 weeks go by and it's like, hey guys, so I was gone. Sorry, but I'm back for my 31 week through 36 week, and all these gaps and stuff. But even just looking back and seeing like the similarities and the differences between these pregnancies, and being able to keep this as like a journal for myself, but also for anybody out there who's actually interested. The blog is called itsonlyreality.com. It's all spelled out, and I'm going to leave a link so that when it is live, like you guys can check it and see if there's new updates about this pregnancy. That means that I published them, but I still have to go through and proofread and everything. And I'm due to make a post for week 22. Didn't write that yet. Don't know when I will. It might be late. So whenever that one's up, that's probably when I'll make everything live. But there's a lot more updates and details about that. But I have been going through it. I've been glowing through it with this pregnancy. It's been hard. The first trimester with Petra was very difficult on me, on my body. And this one was too. A lot of nausea, throwing up all the time. That, to me, that's like the worst part of it, is just throwing up consistently. I hate that feeling. I hate just feeling nauseous all day long and not knowing how to get rid of it. And like, oh, I hadn't been throwing up. Now all of a sudden I did. Like, what triggered that? Like, what am I doing wrong? All this stuff. And just feeling a little bit out of control, feeling very tired, feeling out of breath, as some of you guys had noticed and commented about me having a shortness of breath, and obviously not really getting exercise because I felt like garbage, for several weeks, I guess months, not really getting a lot of cardio and everything like that. I'm starting to get a little bit better and being able to have more endurance, but it's still, according to my last pregnancy and the blog that I did with Petra, if it's similar, in a few weeks, I should be starting to feel pretty brand new and a lot more normal. But yeah, it's a lot of work making a baby. But yeah, if you care about the details of all the stuff of how I felt, you can go ahead. It's onlyreality.com. And when it's all live, you'll have a lot more progress, belly photos, and all the little intricacies of what I've been craving and how I've been dealing with it. But yeah, I've been feeling, like I said, kind of terrible a majority of the time. It's getting better, but Jerrell has been such a huge help to me, just like he was with my first pregnancy, with Petra. And so it really helps to have a supportive partner and someone who's just really involved in the pregnancy. So before my last, I have one more category, but before that one, I'll let Jerrell explain, like, from his perspective, how he's seen me going through it, what it's been like for him, this pregnancy, for the past 22 weeks.
How has it been, Jerrell? Good question. Um, it's never easy seeing your spouse go through like something that's very debilitating where they they're just not themselves and they can't be active or go and do the things or enjoy the stuff that you guys usually do together or as a family even. So that part was an adjustment in itself because it's you never want to see someone essentially being sick or being ill and not being able to be themselves. And then you couple that with a lot of like we talked about this stuff, like personally the stuff that was going on, and then the quarantine that happened and all the places being shut down. It's like, okay, so my wife can only eat certain things and she's feeling really bad, and then all these other places are closed and then we can't have certain things because our normal go-to spots are different things, and it just quarantine hit and then all that stuff happening. So it's been difficult to say the least, but God is faithful and he's definitely given us all of the resources, all the strength that we needed to get through it. Another thing that was difficult was being in the middle of a book release. So there's a lot of work that was needed for finishing the book, then going to publish it, then doing all the marketing, promotion, and that aspect. But then really paring down my hours because we're homeschooling our daughter. So I had to pretty much do the homeschooling most days, and then taking care of Tia when she wasn't feeling good, or making the food and being the one to clean up and all these different things. So it's like juggling all of these things and then having shortened hours for work and in the middle of major deadlines and different things. So like I said, God made a way for it to happen. So it is all worth it. And it has been trying, but it's going to be definitely worth it and rewarding for our family growing and just setting up our future for everybody, and just doing what we're called to do. Like God is going to enable you through resources, through strength, through wisdom and discernment to do whatever it is that you will need to do in life. And he's definitely done that for us during this time. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah, it's yeah, you just kind of have to take it day by day. And something that I keep reminding myself is like when I just feel really awful and I'm just like, but it's not forever. This is not forever and it will pass. And then also knowing, because the Lord told us as far as 2 biological children we will have. So this, I believe that the Lord told me is my second and final pregnancy, bearing a child naturally, and other children we have will be adopted. So it's kind of like, I can do this, one more time. And I can do this for a few more months. Like, it's going to be okay. And we'll just take it day by day and get through it. But yeah, Jerrell is a very positive person, has a wonderful outlook. And through my tears and crying and getting super emotional about like stuff, whether it's big or small, like I said, it's a lot to create a human, but it's also an amazing, amazing, miraculous thing. And when I go on Instagram or whatever and I see people who are just like, yeah, I just lost my baby and I've had 2 miscarriages, it's like, and even me personally going through a miscarriage, it's like I don't take it for granted. The fact that we have a healthy baby in there and that I'm alive, that like my husband cares about me, that we're healthy. And so it's wonderful. Like it's just a blessing and it's just a gift. So as far as sharing it with the world, because like we said, we didn't mean to keep this under wraps for so long, but 2 things kind of pushed it back to unexpected things, or yeah, I guess becoming pregnant, we just never expected these things to be an issue. We, with Petra, I think announced around 12 weeks, which is when a lot of people usually announce 12, 13 weeks because you're like, I'm in the safety zone, which by the way, there's no safety zone. Jesus is a safety zone because a lot of stuff just happens, unfortunately, in this fallen world, but God will help us through it. So I think I intended to do a similar thing, but then with everything with the healthcare system and all the things and restrictions that they have now in hospitals and clinics and seeing your OBGYN, I knew this time around I wanted a midwife. I've done a lot of research about the difference between going through hospital and having that whole process. I've been through that, and then going through a midwife is different. And I really was adamant about that, but I knew I needed to do my research on interviewing them and finding the right one. But also I was a little more hesitant to just get on it, because I'm like, if you're making, spouses can't come in and everything for me, and you can disagree with this, it's fine. We can disagree. For myself, I was adamant, and I believed that the Lord was also adamant about the decision of going either in a timing where spouses were now allowed to be in the room and stuff, or finding someone who was willing to allow my spouse and my daughter in the room. I felt very strongly that this is a family experience that we want to experience as a family, to all be there. In all of my appointments with Petra, my pregnancy with her, Jerrell was always there. Not a lot of dads really care to do that or are expecting to do that. It's usually on the woman, but I'm like, took both of us to make a baby. This is a lot, even just to gotta do a checkup, blood test, blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't want to do that by myself. I didn't want to do it the first time, and I'm not doing the second time. So after a while, because it got pushed back because of all these unknown things in the health industry, and also because I felt terrible. Like, I could barely do anything. And so the last thing on my mind was like, now I got to find somebody and call them and see if they're available and try to make an appointment, try to get to that appointment without throwing up. Like, I was just it just felt like a huge insurmountable task that I just couldn't get to for so long. So we did end up finding a midwife. I had people already in my phone that I was like, research them more, later contact them. So after like narrowing it down, I had like 3 people, and then one person wasn't accepting new clients. And then another person, I was like, well, she got back to me and she's available. I'm just going to meet with her first. And then it ended up being like an amazing fit. I really like her. She has been a midwife for a long time and just has a really positive outlook, a great personality. And even in her practice, because she's towards the end of her career, like almost like she could retire, she has very few clients. When we went and met with her in her private practice, nobody was there. She even came in on her day off, where she usually doesn't take meetings. We sat down for like 3 hours, me, Jerrell, and Petra, in her office, and talked about like what the process is going to be like with her and just getting ready and all that stuff. And I felt very much like you go in there and it feels like normal. Because a lot of things about life, you go into the grocery store, everybody's wearing a mask. You go outside and there's just signs everywhere, like don't sit down and don't stand up and don't do this and don't do that and don't be close. And it's just like I just wanted something to feel normal, like in my life. And so God provided that, and I was just so grateful. So that day that we met with her was also the day that we filmed our announcement video. And that was when I was 19 weeks pregnant. So that's 3 weeks ago we filmed that announcement video. So I've needed to edit that and create like the music for it. And being out of town and trying to get all that done, like it took me a little bit longer than I expected, because I'm visiting family and I'm not trying to be like on my computer the whole time. And part of it, I was like, I didn't feel up to it and I was in bed. So either way, finding the midwife, like her doing like a little bit of an exam, because it was just the consultation. We have to have our actual appointments after that. But I felt a lot better. Like I found a doctor. I feel like I'm doing the right things and everything's falling into place. And now we have the footage for the announcement video. Now I can make it. And I kind of felt like, well, now we can get the ball rolling and get the news out there. And the great thing about this announcement video, that is me singing in the video, is years ago, the Lord told me one of my first cover songs, because I have made my own songs and I've put them out there. I'm not a record label. I'm just doing this on my computer. But he told me the first cover song that I would do to put out in public would be Stand By Me. That song, this, like I said, it's been probably 1 or 2 years since he said that. And then later he was saying, and then this song will play during your announcement video when you're pregnant with your second child. And I was like, okay, cool. I didn't even know when that would be though. So now it all comes around, and it's like my first cover song is Stand By Me. It's my announcement video song. And then like here we are with the baby on the way. And like it's really cool when God tells you details ahead of time. Sometimes it's frustrating because you're like, but you told me this, when is it happening? Like, is it now? Is it now? Is it now? But then when it finally does happen, you're like, oh, this is sweet. Like the timing is perfect. And I'm glad that I waited. And that's not the final version of the cover song I want to do. It'll be more produced. But this was the kind of the rough cut and getting it out there just for the announcement. So after that rambling, is there anything, Jerrell, that you want to add to that from your perspective? That's kind of the last category. That is the last category that I have.
I don't even know what category this is. This is about
making the announcement and why it took so long and stuff.
Well, everything that she said. That's it. So, I mean, for me, it was cool to be a part of it. We shot it. We went there. She edited it. And then she went away to another room for a few hours. And then later on, there was a song that was done. And now we can hear her beautiful voice again. Because I've heard some cuts of some songs in the past few years, but not like a song, like a song that could play on the radio for a while. So it's good to hear you singing again, and excited for these final produced tracks and when they're going to drop. So I was excited to see the announcement video, and you did a good job with it. And
did you almost cry at all?
Not me, other people in the family, but yeah, I was just smiling because it was nice to see and to know that we'll always have this, and then this new child will be like, hey, that was when I was in the belly, kind of a thing. But yeah, you did a good job.
Thank you. So that's basically a long-winded story to follow up on our announcement. If you guys do have more questions, we can do follow up with an actual Q&A. But I wanted to put out there maybe some questions that would already be on your mind about this, and we're glad to be talking about it. And the time really is going by so fast. Like, I can't believe I'm already over halfway, and it just feels like so much needs to be done. Like, I'm trying not to be overwhelmed about it all. But these are our honest thoughts and feelings about it. So thank you for listening. Thank you again for everybody who's sent so much love and prayers and encouragement and congratulations our way. It's kind of surreal to have so many people support you, because most people, it's like you tell your family and your friends and they're happy, and then you do this and that. But to have literally hundreds of comments of people I've never met, I may never meet you guys, but you care enough about little old me and little old Jerrell, little old Petra, that to say something, to watch, to support, to be encouraging to us, even just on our podcast. So yeah, so thank you for that. We're just glad to be a vessel that God would choose to be able to say anything to you guys. It's still mind-blowing that anybody cares anything about what we have to say about any topic. So thank you again. And if you do want to support this podcast and this channel, I do have a way to do that through PayPal. It's paypal.me/Kytia L'amour if you want to send a financial gift. And otherwise, we just continue to appreciate your kind comments and your ratings, and just the fact that you listen and all that stuff is just really amazing. So more to come in the future. Stay tuned. All right, we love you guys, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Bye, guys. Thank you for hearing this podcast. And we love you. And bye-bye. And make sure to get a thumbs up and subscribe. Bye.
This is the